Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Nights of Horror. Tonight, my guest is Richard Hilliard. Welcome, Richard.
Hello, Matthew. How are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you this morning?
Doing all right. Doing all
So,
right.
so
Not the
sorry to
biggest
get you out
fan
of your
of
tomb so early.
yeah. Caffeine and I are as one.
I wish I were more one with the caffeine right now. Um, so, what I'd like to do is go through a few of your posters with you, talk about the choices you made, talk about the processes and decisions you made, and also what it was like to sort of like work with the people whom commissioned them, or if you approached people, because sometimes that's the case as well. Um, I'm having a little trouble placing the order, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say Dracula 1972 was an early one.
Well, yeah. What happened was it goes the story goes back a little bit further than that, and give you a little biographical sketch. Was that I was born a monster kid. I practically came out of the womb a monster kid, and my mom was really into horror films, and we saw a lot of stuff. I saw stuff way too early in age. She originally, I guess, my first memory of being at the movies was seeing Dracula, Prince of Darkness in the drive-in in 1965, and I was 3 years old. And my mom made a huge error in parenting a year later when she took me to see Psycho when I was 4 years old. That was a bad move. That was the one movie that really freaked me out. Everything else was fine. But I grew up in a rural area of Virginia, and my grandparents were farmers. My father was a factory worker. My mom was an accountant, and I fell in love with drawing and sketching very early on. I became aware of illustration um, as a field of endeavor. I really got interested in the work of Basil Gogos and Frank Frazetta. I got creepy and eerie and famous monsters and all those magazines really early. Another error in parental judgment. I got one thing I'll show you. My mom bought this for me when I was 7 years old. The original is in Mylar with a acid free backing board, but this is the famous Eerie Pubs Terror Tales with Chick Stone illustration of a gigantic Frankenstein munching on some female victims like spare ribs. So yeah, that's a classic. But I graduated from high school, went to New York City, got my bachelor's degree at Pratt Institute, and started in DC's New Talent program in the mid '80s. I was there for a little while, and they just kind of kept stringing me along. And I wanted to actually have some income. So I had two portfolios when I left Pratt. I had a design portfolio and an illustration portfolio. So I went into the design field and was doing illustration as a freelancer uh, all through the 80s and 90s. And then late in the 80s, I started doing work for the garage kit scene, the resin and vinyl garage kit scene. And I was doing a lot of monster illustrations for companies like, oh golly, Resin from the Grave and Resonator, Alternative Images, who I still work for today, all these different companies. And then Dark Horse Comics came calling, and they wanted me to do some illustrations for, they were doing licensed kits of the Universal Monsters. So I did the illustrations for all the assembly drawings for that. And then I left New York and I came back to Virginia and I started teaching at James Madison University. And believe it or not, I fell into the children's book market, which was just, and I started doing nonfiction children's books on historic space flight, something else I'm interested in. And I was writing and illustrating these books, and that was like a 10-year detour. And you don't really, when you're a children's book illustrator, you shy away from the certain genres because people are watching you. They actually did a background check on me before they gave me my first contract. And after my editor retired, I got kind of soured on that whole field. And then I decided I'm going back to the horror roots. So I started doing posters for myself. And then I started doing posters for shows. And this is where we finally come back to the Dracula in 1972. So I started doing posters that I was only selling at certain shows, like Resintopia was one of them, Chiller Theater, which is a big show in New Jersey, and the Jersey Fest, which is at Newark Airport. And then the Dracula AD 1972, I did that because Caroline Munro was the guest at one of the Chiller shows. I'm not sure if it was that show or the show after that. I spoke with a gentleman, Phil Noble Jr., who was the editor-in-chief, or is the editor-in-chief of the newly relaunched Fangoria. And he had me do a Texas Chainsaw Massacre illustration for the first issue. And then that's where the whole poster thing really took off. That's when people started contacting me about doing licensed pieces, the limited edition screen printed posters. So I know a long story, but we got there.
We don't mind long stories here.
Okay.
So, all right, I've seen the Halloween issue of Fangoria that you did, since you mentioned Fangoria. And obviously, you just said the Dracula in 1972. It seems though that most of your commission pieces has been through Mad Duck. Is that correct?
Yes, I got the first two I did was actually for Bottleneck. I did Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street 3 piece that was part of what they call a mystery tube release. In December, I guess you pay $75 and you get a tube with a bunch of stuff in it. And one of them was either going to be my Nightmare on Elm Street, another person's Batman, and then there was something else, maybe Jurassic Park, I can't remember. So that was kind of a interesting release because a lot of people were like, oh gee, I was hoping for Batman, but I got this crummy Nightmare on Elm Street poster. or I got a IM through Instagram. And it was like, I got this crummy Batman poster and I want your Nightmare on Elm Street. So there was a lot of trading and a flurry of mailing after that release. But then I did Lord of the Rings, a triptych for them. And I call it the Triptych of Malevolence. It's the Ringwraith, Saruman, and Gollum. And then Mad Duck called me, and they've just been giving me a ton of great stuff to work on. And I've done, golly, I guess 8 releases or 9 releases for Mad Duck. I've actually lost count. And there's more in the pipe that I'm not going to talk
I have 8 in my notes.
There you go. Well, okay, good.
It's interesting. I mean, so how does that come about in terms of like what you're doing? Do they just assign you a film, or do you bring ideas, or is it a mixture?
Well, it seems like it's always the same story. And this story goes with Mad Duck, it goes with Fangoria, and it goes with meeting Greg Nicotero and working on Creepshow. It always starts the same way. I get the question, how fast are you? That's how it starts. And The good news is that being in New York for 20 years, working in graphic design, working in exhibit design, freelance illustration, you are fast or you don't eat. And I have literally, I got a call one morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, from a client. He needed an illustration he needed concept illustrations for Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, and the Wolfman for Universal Studios Japan. And he needed all 4 of them done by 8 p.m. that night. 8 p.m. that night. That was so they could be, I'm dating myself, so they could be faxed to Japan, LA, and New York simultaneously. 5 p.m. in LA, 8 p.m. in New York, and I guess 8 or 9 a.m. in Japan. So you do it. You just clear the boards. You put a cup of coffee on. You put on Biohazard or Rob Zombie or Judas Priest or Ronnie James Dio, and the pen hits the paper, and you make it happen. But so yeah, they all say, "Are you fast?" And then you find out that somebody stiffed them or somebody's slow walking them, and they need something really quickly. And what happened with Mad Duck was Brad is the owner of Mad Duck. He said, "Are you fast?" And he had the Guyver license, and the window was closing on being able to produce a licensed piece through Brian Yuzna. So I had that thing done and approved by Yuzna within the week.
Wow.
And that's how the
How
guy.
many drafts did you go through?
Well, we did. I did one sketch that they liked half of it. It was the Guyver figure, essentially the poster you see now, and then I had kind of like floating heads in mist. That's something I'm more or less known for. I do a lot of that behind the Guyver, and Brad wanted the Guyver to be more physically interactive with the boss bad guy, which I can't remember the character's name, something with a B. I can't remember it, and then so turned that around, and then they loved it, and we went to finish with it.
So is that your fastest turnaround on a poster from start to finish?
No.
Okay.
The Night of the Demon I did in one day.
One day. Wow.
Night of the Demon was done in one day.
Night of the Demon's a track because it's the 57 Night of the Demon.
Correct.
Which people might think it's actually the 80s, which is the Night of the Demon as well. And there's Night of the Demons. But yeah, so how did that one come about? Because I feel like that's a fairly obscure film.
Well, I had done a kind of a earlier version of that piece for a resin kit for alternative images. And Brad had said he contacted me and wanted to do Night of the Demon, just something that he loved. And it's such a terrific movie. It's such a kind of underrated, unnecessarily obscure film. I think part of that is because it came out the same year as Curse of Frankenstein, and Hammer completely redefined the genre. But Night of the Demon stands on its own as a really interesting kind of melding of film noir and horror. Critics debate endlessly whether the monster should or should not have been shown. And I am firmly in the camp of show the damn monster. And they did. Which, of course, Basil Gogos did a great portrait of that for Famous Monsters back in the 60s. Another one my mom dutifully bought for me off the racks. I was so little, of course, I couldn't read, but they were monster books. And I love my monster books. But yeah, so the Night of the Demon, we decided to kind of redo the piece I'd done for alternative images and turn it into a little more of a detailed piece. And like I said, I turned that around basically overnight.
So you got done teaching it, presumably.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Okay, so you alluded to me being a vampire. And here's my schedule. I get up at the crack of noon pretty much every day. and then I do whatever I have to do around the house, any kind of errands I have to run during the early afternoon. I go and I teach. I come home, I shower, put on a movie, and then I work till 4 or 5 in the morning. That's my normal day.
I can relate. That was me in grad school.
Yeah. And for all those years that I was in New York and I had to be in an office at 8 a.m., or even worse, I had to be on the floor of the auto show to make sure all my displays were up and running at 5 in the morning. Those were tough times. But fortunately, I'm able to teach in the afternoon and the evening now, and it works out very well.
I do have, perhaps I don't know if it's a strange question or not. You have a lot of the crossover posters. What I mean by that is a lot of them in the Italian title as well. Where is that choice coming from?
That comes from my deep and abiding love of French, Belgian, and Italian posters from the 1960s and the 1970s. I love doing the pastiches of the Italian posters. Now, I can be a little controversial at times with some of my assertions. So here we go. I think movie posters in the 1960s and 1970s from the US by and large were terrible. They're just awful. They all are kind of regurgitating Saul Bass and Andy Warhol ad nauseum. I mean, all you have to do is just look at the American one sheet for Planet of the Apes, which is essentially a two-color poster, and compare that to the French La Planète des Singes poster, and it is night and day. The French poster is just a beautiful, full color, rich, just meaty illustration. Charlton Heston with the apes binding him on both sides, and then the ape city in the background. And it's amazing. And the American poster is like, yeah, you like Andy Warhol. All right, great. So that's where that comes from, and I love those posters. And whenever I get a chance to do one of those pastiches, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or the Tombs of the Blind Dead poster, or even some I've just done for myself, like the Abominable Dr. Fibes poster. Actually, I did that for myself, and then sold a few at Jersey Fest a year ago. Those posters are done with that kind of love of those rich posters that were coming out of Europe when all America could produce was weak sauce.
Well, I mean, your Texas Chainsaw Massacre that's behind you is fairly Italian in
Yeah.
its design as well.
Yep. And I even I stole the original the distribute. Boy, you can tell it's early. Distributor's logo. And threw that up in the top there. So yeah, I love the Italian posters, and they used to be really affordable, and now they're not.
Mm.
Like everything else.
Yeah, poster collecting has definitely exploded, I'd say, in the last 5 years.
It's crazy, and I'm not going to name names, but I will tell you, I have friends. I have a lot of friends who are poster collectors. Friends who collect the new alternative movie posters, like Mad Duck is doing, but also friends who collect original one sheets. And I have friends down in Atlanta, Georgia, husband and wife, and they took out a second mortgage on their house to buy a Day the Earth Stood Still poster. And I think they dropped $80,000 on that. Yeah.
I mean, I guess they retain their value, right? Like,
They do. They do. The thing about all those comic books and posters, all those pre-World War II posters, is there's so blessed few of them, and not just because we're 70, 80 years down the road. It's because of the paper drives
yeah.
during World War II. That's how so many comics and papers and newspapers got gobbled up. And Yeah, that's why those pieces of paper are so valuable. Plus, they're glorious. The illustrations on those posters just can't be beat.
Well, you also had the case where people would just paper endlessly over posters,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you just end up like with a 3-inch thick poster.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's amazing how people they were so disposable, and even original art. Um, One of my friends worked at Marvel Comics back in the day, and he was low level staffer, and he was charged with cleaning out some flat files. And he found a bunch of art boards in one of the flat files, and they had photostats um, rubber cemented to these art boards. And rubber cement deteriorates over time, and they were peeling up. And he peeled one of them, just came right off, and underneath was an original Gene Colan illustration from Daredevil. And someone had just taken rubber cement and put something else on top of it to reuse the artboard.
Jeez.
And that was crazy.
Um, you mentioned you mentioned Dr. Fibes. I saw on your Instagram that you're working on something.
Well, I threw the second Dr. Fibes piece up. I had done that some time ago. I try and feed the beast at least once a week, the social media beast. I've got so much stuff in the pipe that I can't show anyone because of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah,
And
we try to get people to break those all the time. So.
no, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. I'm not even going to tell you who they're for. But the ice is starting to crack. I've got stuff to unveil on Black Friday, fortunately.
Okay.
And then the vast majority of stuff I don't think I'm going to be able to show until after the new year, which just drives me crazy because it's been done since March.
Mm.
I finished a whole series of works for something I'm not going to tell you, and I'm not going to show you. Back right before COVID hit, and then COVID hit, and everything got shut down, and now the stuff can't be unveiled till after the first of the year, I don't believe. But it's coming. Of course, I'm just champing its bit to show it, because the last thing I want people to think is that I'm slacking, because it's far from the truth.
Well, you said it was over 13 plus pieces.
Yeah, 13. I think now it's 14.
Wow.
But I get to show 3, I believe, on Black Friday. So we'll start chipping away come Black Friday.
And they're all Dr. Fibes based?
No. I threw the
Okay.
Dr. Fibes up there just as a kind of like, here, look at this, other stuff, and I can't show you what it is. So here's this Dr. Fibes out of the archives. No.
Okay.
Something. Oh, no one's ever seen this. Let me feed the beast. Let me throw something on Instagram, so people don't think I'm hibernating.
Well, because I saw the number, I thought, of course, of the line from the film "9 shall die," and I was like, "Why isn't it 9?"
No, it's not quite like that. No, I would love to do a Fibes piece. Vincent Price. Vincent Price. Interesting that you come to Vincent Price, because I'd met back in the '90s. I'd met a young lady at the mall. That's the beginnings of all good New Jersey love stories. We met at the mall, and I was friends with her cousin. And he's like, "Oh yeah, she loves old horror movies. She loves Vincent Price." And I thought, "Oh, I need to get to know this person." And we've been married now for 24 years. So, and we still love Vincent Price. Although my wife's funny. She will not watch Last Man on Earth. It's
Okay.
her words is, that one's too creepy. And she loves Fibes, and she loves the Poe Corman films. And oh golly, I'm missing one.
We just showed The Bat, actually.
Oh yeah. And
2 weeks
House on
ago.
Haunted Hill, those are all favorites of my wife's and mine. And we love the classics. She shies away from the intense stuff. She's actually gonna ask me why I took down the Abbott and Costello poster and put the Exorcist up, because she said that would never hang in our house. Okay, but for this interview, the Exorcist is up there. So
Well, that's my favorite horror film too. So
it's in my top three.
okay,
Texas Chainsaw Massacre #1, and then it depends on what day of the week you ask me. Exorcist and The Shining.
okay.
So I'd say it's pretty good company.
We on November 1st we had these we had several scholars on, and it was like these admissions of blasphemy in relationship to horror. And my admission was that I prefer Halloween 3 to any other Halloween film.
Wow, that is some blasphemy. Holy
Well, I
smokes.
got the mask right behind me.
I see that. The silver shamrock.
Yeah.
What is my blasphemy? Jeez. I've got a lot of blasphemies. I guess trying to think specifically in horror. The one blasphemy that I confessed to you was I'm not the biggest fan of Guillermo del Toro.
That's true.
I think Pan's Labyrinth is a masterpiece. I think that's his best film. I really enjoyed Crimson Mist, and not
Crimson Peak.
Yeah, I got the Crimson Mist is the Batman graphic novel where he's a vampire. But and it all falls off from there for me. That it's just another blasphemy is I prefer, and maybe this isn't as blasphemous as it once was, but I prefer the Dino De Laurentiis King Kong to Peter Jackson's.
Okay.
Meryl
Streep has a story about that one.
Yeah, she was up for the female lead. That went to Jessica Lange ultimately.
Yeah, she was told she was too ugly to play the part.
I walked in and his son was sitting there very excited that he'd brought in this new actress. And the father said to his son in Italian, because I understand Italian, he said, "Che brutta." Why do you bring me this ugly thing?
Whoa.
Yeah, very sobering, as a young girl. So I said to him, "Mi dispiace molto, but I understand what you're saying. I'm sorry I'm not beautiful enough to be in King Kong."
Okay. But I don't know. From a horror standpoint, I guess probably my biggest blasphemy is that although I do absolutely love Last Man on Earth, my favorite filmed version of I Am Legend is the Chuck Heston, the Omega Man.
I thought you were about to go real blasphemy for a second.
No, I can't. Yeah, no. I'm kind of anti CGI with horror films, so there's no way I'm gonna extol the virtues of that one. So I love some Chuck Heston Omega Man action.
You got two questions in my mind, and they're not related whatsoever. So I'm going to do them in chronological order. Okay. You love 60s, 70s horror. You love Italian horror. Why no Giallo posters?
Well, the Giallos are a little bit of a tough sell for me. I'm just not that much into them. I guess I own a handful. Just never really got into the Giallos that much. I'm trying to think of if I had to pick one that I like best. I guess it would be Deep Red, or do people? I guess do people consider Fulci's the Psychic a Giallo?
I don't think so.
Sorta. That would be up there for me. I love Lucio Fulci.
Okay.
But yeah, I just never really got. I like the supernatural, and I know that's kind of flies in the face of Texas Chainsaw Massacre being my favorite horror film, because it has, that's not the supernatural at all. That's the American nuclear family gone horribly, horribly wrong. But I never really got into too much of the stalk and slash stuff unless it had a supernatural bent. Like I only became invested in Jason when he became a zombie set. And but Michael Myers, I think, is interesting because he's always had the 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 patina of the supernatural.
Sure.
So I do love Halloween and Halloween 2. I think Halloween 2 has one of the greatest openings ever when the guy comes up to Loomis and says, "What's going on? I've been Halloween to death." And he goes, "You don't know what death is." And they cue the music and he runs off into the night after Michael Myers. That gets me every time. I think that is one of the best openings of any horror film ever. So
I
yeah.
think I think there needs to be a Dr. Loomis answering machine myself.
Oh
Just being
yeah.
like,
Dr.
the
Loomis,
horror is not here. Leave a message for the horror.
Dr. Loomis Siri.
Yeah.
You don't know what hot is.
It's like mocking you. So funny.
or Alexa. Alexa, oh, my Alexa's gonna go off. Don't do that. Don't do that.
I get jealous of Dr. Loomis.
Yeah.
My second my second question that I was thinking about was as a person who doesn't like CGI, is there any current sort of in the last 10 years practical effects horror movie that really does it for you?
Yes. And one, The Void.
The Void, excellent choice.
I really like The Void a lot. And I guess again, being a little blasphemous, there's not much past Candyman and Event Horizon that I'm really into. It's a shame, but I don't like the torture porn stuff at all. Although I know it's kind of the bastard children of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I just feel like some of that stuff just gone way too far. I don't care for a lot of the post Scream wink and a nod kind of horror films. I never really got into any of that. So after 1995 to present, there's maybe 10 films that I actually enjoy. The Descent, The Void, and not it's just there's not much. I used to be a big fan of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and
The
now,
Kenneth Branagh, Robert De Niro.
yeah, and now it's kind of diminishing in my view. Each time I watch it, it gets a little less for some reason. It's kind of the same way with Tim Burton's Batman Returns. I used to really be into that, and now I'm just not.
I think the scene of the birth in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the best version of that.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, it's a great scene. The music, Patrick Doyle's score it propels that. soundtracks, and it kind of goes hand in hand with just loving the movies and everything about them. Because friend of mine used to set a cassette recorder next to his speakers, and he would record movies, the audio from VHS, and he would listen to them in the car when he drove. And I was the guy, I would get the soundtrack and listen to that, and then the movie would play in my mind when I drove.
Okay. You mentioned Candyman. You did a really limited edition poster for that, just came out on Mylar.
Yes.
Now,
reflective Mylar. So when you look at the poster, you'll be able to see your reflection in the border, the credits, the hook, and then in the logo. So yeah,
I mean, obvious allusions there to the film, and doing it on reflective Mylar.
Yeah.
Was that your first design on that material?
Well, there's two limited variants of the Guyver on rainbow foil, that iridescent material. But as far as like reflective mirrored Mylar, yeah, the Candyman's the first one I've done like that.
Was that your choice? Was that a Mad Duck choice?
It was Mad Duck asked me what I thought, and I thought it was a great idea. So I'm going to give it totally to Brad. It was his idea, and I was all for it.
Mad Duck seems to do a lot on foil. I mean, much more than anybody else who produces these kind of posters.
Generally, I think that the aesthetic, when applied correctly, is outrageous. I mean, it's just awesome. But I've seen some, not from Mad Duck, but from other producers, that it's just like, foil's not the greatest choice for this image. You and I had spoken earlier about Excalibur. Yeah, that could have been really cool on foil, but that was early in the game for me. And I come from the world of offset lithography, all the kids' books and the magazine illustrations and stuff like that I've done. They're paintings. Up until 2006, I was painting on either masonite or illustration board, or in some cases canvas. And then you send those off and they're scanned, and then the printer prints them in CMYK. Well, then you get into this industry with the screen printed posters, and you start thinking about separate colors and the way they lay on top of each other. And so like for the Candyman, the white goes down first, and then the yellow goes down, and then the red goes down, and then the black goes on top of that. So it's just a different set of muscles. And I'm still definitely learning. The process is very unique. And I've talked to some screen printers who do stuff the old-fashioned way with cut film and things like that, and they've been really helpful getting me to understand the process and the way it works.
It's funny because everyone I've talked to in this series who's an artist everybody has talked about the learning curve.
Oh yeah, it's immense. It's immense. The first thing I did that was full color, I sent it up, and they said, "What are we supposed to do with this? You got to separate this." And I was like, "What? What? Aren't there people who do that?"
They're like, "Yeah, you."
Yeah. Well, the answer was, "Yeah, there are people that do that, but they want a lot of money for it, and we're paying you, so you're doing it." I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right, time to learn a new trade." So,
wow.
I tell my students, you're always one weekend from being an expert at anything. I tell my students, if you go to a job interview and someone says, "Do you know web design?" you say yes, and you've got the weekend to learn web design. And it can be done. It can be done. But you really have to have, another movie metaphor, you have to have the eye of the tiger. Okay? You have to. We should cue the music. But no. Clubber Lang must be defeated.
I want to talk about Excalibur because I think it's a beautiful poster.
Thank you.
And it's a movie I wish more people watched because I think it's the best version of the Merlin Arthur story. How did you come into doing that poster? What were the decisions you made? Because it's a little bit different than most of your posters, I feel like, because there's a hierarchy in it that you don't normally see.
This story goes way back. I do have enough breadcrumbs to get us back to Grandma's house. But
I'll get Mr. Peabody out. We'll be fine.
I'm going to take you all the way back to 1981. I was a first-year student at Pratt Institute, and our thing was, my circle of friends, we would go out on Friday night. We would jump on the GG train, jump on the A train at Hoyt Skimmerhorn, and go to Times Square. In Times Square, there's a Howard Johnson's restaurant and bar. I think it recently closed, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But in 1981, the bartender there was a high school friend of my best friend and wonderful illustrator, John Van Fleet. Anyway, when in the 1980s, legal drinking age in New York was 18 across the board. Now, Matthew, I do not like beer, but vodka, okay, that's a different story. So we would go in there, and happy hour was from 5 to 7, and all drinks were $1. All right. Oh. And the bartender, for $1, the bartender would hook us up with doubles. So the Friday Excalibur opened, we stumbled into that theater, barely aware of our surroundings. We got in the theater just as the film started. There were no seats except the front row. Now, in New York, the front row is 3 feet from the wall that the screen is mounted on, right? So we're sitting there with our knees against the wall, looking up like this, wasted, all right, watching Excalibur. And it was a religious experience. It was just like, oh my God, the sword, the stone, the land, the grail. You know, it was such an experience. And we came out of that movie sober, but loving it, just absolutely loving it. And I know that that weekend, John had done an Excalibur painting, and it came out really well. And John and I were a little competitive with each other, but that was one of those times I was like, I love this movie, John loves this movie, but I'm going to let him have his Excalibur moment as far as like celebrating the film with his artwork. And I've talked about Excalibur in class and the whole time since it came out in 81. Well, Brad called me from Mad Duck and said this was right after Excalibur, or right after Guyver, and he was very pleased with the way Guyver had turned out. And he's like, well, how do you feel about Excalibur? I was just like, hold on. Just let me mix a drink here, and I'll tell you how I feel about Excalibur. I was at school, so there was no mixing drinks. But I took a sip of my iced tea, and I was just like, "Oh yeah, I'm all in on that." And I wanted. You
had your own Excalibur moment. The hand came out of the water, and
yeah, that was it. And it's do an Excalibur poster. Well, I really wanted to do a montage, a little bit of an homage in my own way to Bob Peak, the illustrator who did the original Excalibur poster. Bob Peak, really probably most famous for his Apocalypse Now poster, but an illustrator who had a storied career over at least 4 decades. And at the end of his career, when he was absolutely at the top of his game with the movie posters, I mean, I heard that he got $100,000 for the Apocalypse Now poster. So this is someone who's absolutely at the pinnacle of the field. And that was when I was in the illustration program at Pratt, and we were just, really just soaking up the works of every illustrator. And but so yeah, a montage, homage to Bob Peak, and also a little bit of that kind of hippie trippy thing to get it to look a little bit, not quite a blacklight poster, but something that it kind of plays on the whole aspect of it being so dreamy,
Mm.
and the colors being so saturated in some sequences. Not quite like Suspiria levels, but pretty close in some sequences of the film.
You also, I mean, it's a very similar color palette to your Black Sabbath poster.
Yes. Another one with Bava, with those crazy colors and the gels and all that stuff that he was doing. And really interesting counterpoint to Black Sunday, which I feel is, for me, it's the most beautifully photographed black and white film of all. I think that film, you can just take freeze frames of that film and put them in a frame and hang them on a wall. They're just the compositions and the black and white photography in Black Sunday is just outrageously good. And then turns around and does Black Sabbath and really starts this whole thing of saturated color in horror that we later would see with Suspiria, as I mentioned, and the Corman Poe movies, and then to a lesser degree the Hammer films.
Mm. Well, also another piece you did was Bride of the Reanimator, and that has a similar quality to it as well.
I did that. I just did that one for myself.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, well, partly for myself and also for a friend, John Auspaul. Um, he loves that movie, and I did that one for him. I just, if there's nothing on my drawing board as far as a paying project goes, I just do whatever I feel like. I don't stop drawing and painting. I
We
kind of
got you
like,
got to do a Void one then.
I did. You got to go a little deeper into my Instagram, sir. It's
I
there.
went through.
It's
I will.
there.
I will re-go through here.
It's there.
I'm putting like a square box in my notebook now.
So
The very rare square box in the notes.
okay, all right.
Means I made a critical mistake.
Happens even to the best of academia.
I mean, since it's hanging behind you and since it is my favorite horror film, can you talk us through the process of how you came to your Exorcist poster and the decisions you made and just everything?
Well, I don't do a lot of sketching, and if clients need sketches, they get stuff that are a little more finished than what they're usually used to. That comes from years ago. I was designing a poster. I'd done a series of regional theater posters. And the way that worked is you sent a sketch to the director, and then they would give you feedback and you would go to finish. And I did Romeo and Juliet, and I sent a pencil sketch in, and the director comes back and says, "Is it going to be lines like this?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I, from that point on, I would do a little more finished sketching because I don't have a lot of patience for questions like that. So yeah, so now I do things a little more finished, but so I don't even sketch for myself as much as I used to. I'll do really rough thumbnails, but most of my sketching is done when I go to bed at night. I do it in my mind, and I kind of compose images in my mind. I talk about this with my students, the ability to visualize. And some people have it and some people don't. I have a student who's a fantastic fantasy illustrator, and she claims she has no ability to visualize in her mind, that she has to do everything on paper before she gets started. So with all the posters that I do, they all start when I'm just kind of laying down with my eyes shut and thinking about the images. totally different from the Excalibur piece, which is a montage. Most of my pieces are single image with some kind of conceptual aspect on them. And thinking about The Exorcist, I wanted to draw on something that I had a debate with a gentleman one time. Believe it, I was getting my car serviced, and I don't know, I had a bunch of magazines and books next to me because it was a long process that was being done. I had a car one time that to change the headlamp bulbs, they had to pull the entire front end off the car. Right? Just insane. So I had gotten pulled over for having one headlamp out, and promised the officer that dutifully the next day I would get that replaced. I didn't realize it would take 4 hours to have that done. But I'm sitting there in the auto place with my comics and graphic novels and I think Famous Monsters and stuff. This gentleman basically said, "You read trash like that?" And thus began an interesting conversation that ended up on The Exorcist. And this gentleman was very much a fundamentalist Christian, and we had a fairly spirited discussion about horror films and what they meant to people of faith. And my assertion was that The Exorcist is probably one of the most pro-Christian movies ever made. That if Friedkin, Jewish descent, just went all in on the idea of good versus evil in the classic biblical mode. You have Father Marion, you have Father Karras, Reagan in the bed, possessed by the demon, and they're saying the power of Christ compels you. The power of Christ compels you. And then there's a shot of Max von Sydow, and he says, "It is God himself who compels you."
I cast you out, unclean spirit,
Shove it up your ass.
in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. It is he who commands you. He who flung you from the heights of heaven to the depths of hell.
Fuck him.
Be gone.
Fuck him, Garrus.
From
Fuck
this
him.
creature of God. Be gone. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. By this sign of the Holy Cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with the Father and the Holy Spirit. Damien.
Amen.
And I thought the cross and the face of Reagan possessed by the demon would be a really interesting combo. And that's where I came up with the idea of the cross illuminating the face. And some of the fans said, "Well, why wasn't the cross upside down?" Well, that's not the point. That's not the point at all. It's the conflict.
Right.
That is the conflict boiled down for me in one image. And I remember this was quite a moment for me. September of 2019, I got to meet Greg Nicotero, and he really liked my artwork, and he put my Exorcist piece on his Instagram feed. And I got 14,000 likes in one
Nice.
day. Wow. I was like, whew, now I know what it feels like to be Kim Kardashian, right? But people were commenting about how that it really did kind of boil down the film to its essence. And that's what I try and do with any of my single image pieces.
Okay. No, I mean, it is a great piece. And I mean, obviously, my favorite film too, so that helps. But the thing with The Exorcist is that I've seen a lot of different art pieces done with it, and it's oddly a movie that doesn't translate easily.
No, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. My next challenge is, and no one may ever see this except for me. One of these days, I'm going to do an Exorcist 2 piece,
Okay.
So because there you go, there's that
With them facing each other.
yeah, of John Borman, Excalibur, right, which is the film he did after Exorcist 2. Widely reviled as what, the worst horror movie ever made by some.
Pretty bad. Well, you've got Nickel is in Exorcist 3.
That's right. That's right. Depends on the cut you watch, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, the theatrical release.
Yeah, which I prefer. If I don't think that's a great film by any stretch, but I definitely prefer the theatrical to the director.
It has the best jump scare in all of horror.
Is that the when the figure walks across the hallway? Yeah, that's a good one. That long, monotonous shot of people going about their business in a deserted hospital late at night, and then that figure with those they're not shears, but that
like they cut open a skull or something. I don't know. They're bone cutting shears or something.
That coroner.
Well, because you get that jump scare by the angry patient right before, and you think, "Oh, the jump scare is done," and then no, the real jump scare is coming.
And Exorcist 3 also has the best 3D rendition of the Joker I've ever seen. Like of all like the toys and statues and busts you can buy, that one shot of the Saint as the Joker, I love that piece. That's an incredible sculpture. I don't think they intended it to be the Joker, but to me, it's the Joker.
Well, I mean, you are a little bit of a fan of Batman. So.
Yeah, I like Batman a little bit. Well, if you're on my Instagram, I'm the Batman Professor. So
just a skosh of Batman in your life.
A dollop.
So you also have a Night of the Living Dead poster, and your Night of the Living Dead poster is radically different than any other Night of the Living Dead poster I've ever seen.
Another one of those things that just kind of came to me. I don't want to give too much away, but hopefully that's going to be in the marketplace soon-ish. But
in a skosh.
Yeah, soon. I'm like Christopher Walken in a prophecy. Soon. When the girl's like, "When are you gonna let me die?" Soon. Quit being a pest. That. But I've seen a million of them. I've seen some really good ones, and obviously with anything like Night of the Living Dead or The Exorcist or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you see a lot of great stuff and you see a lot of really poor stuff too. But that one just came to me. Kind of also, I got to be completely transparent, is it's a little bit influenced by the Savini remake too, with those opening shots of the moon. So then I thought, well, let's do the moon as an eye. And I'm fascinated by eyes. I talk about that with my students all the time. Is whenever I'm drawing something, I always start with the eyes. You're a visual artist. The eyes are the window to the soul. The eyes tell you so much about a person, personality, a creature. You go back to Outlaw Josie Wales, where the Indian says, "Why did you pick this particular order of dispatching these Union soldiers?" And he's just like, but the one guy, he had crazy eyes, and that's the one you shoot first. So, so I always start with the eyes, and the eye and the moon and the skull and all that stuff. And then the the farmhouse, very dark, one light on. Another homage going back to the 70s, something I'm absolutely fascinated by. And this totally comes from my mom, is Gothic romance novel covers. Now, I've never read one, and I don't ever expect to read one. But in the early 70s, propelled by the popularity of Dark Shadows,
Nice.
it was literally hundreds, if not thousands, of these Gothic romance trashy novels in drugstores and bookstores and newsstands across America. And they all pretty much feature the exact same image, which is a woman running away from a structure, a house, a castle, a shack, whatever, with one light on, right?
So the Victoria Winters moment.
Exactly. I think that's probably why I like Crimson Peak so much, is because it trades on that on the Gothic romance novel.
See,
aesthetic.
now I want to see your Dark Shadows poster.
Dark Shadows. Yeah, that was one of those things I never really got into that. Even like I can remember my wife and my mom being into the Ben Cross remake series.
Yeah, in the 90s.
I like the Barnabas character, and I like the Quentin Werewolf character, but beyond that, yeah, I never really got into Dark Shadow much.
I have the whole set. It comes in a coffin.
I don't know if I have the whole set or I have a like best of set or something. And every time I try and watch it, I'm just like, yeah, I'd rather, if I'm going to go Dan Curtis, I'm watching The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler. Okay. That's my Dan Curtis go-to. Okay. Oh, man, I love me some Carl Kolchak. There's a couple of those on my Instagram, too.
Almost out of time here, so I wanted to ask you if there's a property you want to work on but have yet to be able to, or that you're holding off, waiting for, that special moment.
Well, there's two. I've done some for myself, and you can check them out on my Instagram. But I would love to do a Lugosi Dracula and a Lee Dracula as a set, and just waiting for that to happen. I mean, Hammer, the licensing has been a big mess for a while, but apparently it's gotten all straightened out now. They're even coming out with Christopher Lee Dracula Mego figures. That they're apparently starting to hit stores now. So the licensing for Hammer is starting to get worked out. Universal's their licensing is generally pretty easy to work with. That's one. And then I came really close to getting a 80th anniversary Batman poster gig. And it just, for whatever reason, at the 11th hour, it fell apart. So, I'm hoping that I can get a Batman gig.
Because you have that slight interest in Batman.
Slight interest, yes.
Slight interest. A skosh of an interest.
A skosh of interest. But as I want to do, I've done a lot of Lugosis. I love Lugosi. My wife's family is all from Hungary. And so Bela Lugosi is the pop culture national hero of Hungary. I think Peter Falk is a close second, but Lugosi's still number one. And I'd love to do a Lugosi Igor piece, because I love his Igor. I think that my blasphemy. I've got it. Finally, here it is. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, go for it.
The best Frankenstein movie from the Universal Horror Cycle is Frankenstein. The second best is The Ghost of Frankenstein. All right? I absolutely adore The Ghost of Frankenstein. I'm just not that into Bride. I just think there's a whole lot of goofy weirdness in Bride with like the homunculi and that doesn't interest me at all. The kind of like comedic fantasy elements, But Ghost, I absolutely love. I know people aren't the biggest fans of Lon Chaney Jr., but I think he acquits himself well as the monster. But Lugosi owns that movie. And when the monster is brought back and he's kind of stumbling, and then he walks out into the lightning storm, and Igor's trying to stop him, and then he reaches up and the lightning hits him, and Igor gives him that look. He goes, "Your father was Frankenstein, but your mother was the lightning." I love that. And I think that's just so much fun. And yeah, I would love to pay proper tribute to Lugosi's Igor.
Okay.
Hey, knock on wood.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
Matthew, it's my great pleasure, and I could go on and on and on and on, but we'll save that for part 2. Hopefully,
Part 2. We'll do a multi-part volume series.
Yeah.
And thank all of you for tuning in. Until next time, stay spooky.